Welcome to Whisky.com, where fine spirits meet. My name is Lüning, Horst Lüning. I'm the master taster of Whisky.com, and today we have the best international whiskies from the last 25 years since I'm in business. Yeah, there is a video about the best whiskies, Scottish whiskies from the last 25 years, and this is called the international whiskies because the top 80% of sales are from Scotland. That's a fact. And the others we call international whiskies because they are from different countries, and there are 2 to 3 countries which sell significant amount of high quality whiskies. And first is the US with the Kentucky Straight Bourbon. The next is Ireland with its blended and malt whiskies, and the third is the Uprising Star, the Japanese whiskies, which show, well, very high price taxes as well. Yeah. So the first I would like to mention is the rare breed from Wild Turkey, and this one was bottled the first time as the 1855, if I remember right. This was a travel value exclusive, duty free, and well, in former times, American whiskey was sold here in old Europe as cheap whiskey with 25 ABV, 50 proof. Then they rose it to 37.5. Well, to compete with vodka, which typically was 37.5, and a few decades ago they went to 40% because regulations and legislation said if you want to sell a spirit, then it has to have 40 ABV, 80 proof. And here, Wild Turkey tried for the first time to have a higher ABV and a small batch, and made this test in the close surrounding of the duty-free shops, and it sold incredible good. And then they found a new niche, and then they established this rare breed. And since then, I think it was in the late 90s, last century, the Wild Turkey rare breed is constantly on the shelves. And the prices here in Europe differ quite significantly from year to year, depending how much is shipped to us or not. So prices from the mid-30s up to mid-40s euros are typical. And in the US it's a lot cheaper because there's more competition and more knowledge about Kentucky Straight Bourbon. The next one is the Baker's 7 years of age, with this big B on it in this wine-shaped bottle. And this is from Jim Beam. Jim Beam owns, I think, the biggest stocks of Kentucky Straight Bourbon, maturing Kentucky Straight Bourbon. And the distillers, the master distillers, the master blenders, they know where the good casks are maturing. Very deep in the center, in the warehouse, where temperatures are low, even in hot summers. And from there they select limited amounts, and this small batch bourbon collection where the Bakers, Bookers, Basil Hayden and the Knob Creek is in result from different casks from different locations in those warehouses, but they are always the best they are able to find. And the priciest is the Bookers, the Bucano, a former master distiller of Jim Beam. He died, passed away several years ago. And he was a descendant of the original Beam family, which was formerly called Böhm, was a German family. Yeah. And this Booker's is a little bit too intense for my personal taste. And the Baker's a little smoother, a little sweeter, more comfortable. And it's high ABV, you have to dilute it a little bit to get the full, smooth aroma developing in your mouth. Otherwise, you would have a little bit too much of alcohol in your mouth. The next one is the Connemara, 12 years of age, an Irish one. And in Ireland, there had been a few thousand distilleries, and they all went bankrupt into insolvency because they split from the United Kingdom in the revolution in 1920 and 21. Then they went out of the Commonwealth, and then the prohibition hit them from the US, and then all markets were gone, and those distilleries, they died as the people immigrated, and they had 6 to 7 million inhabitants in Ireland. And after the big immigration and the hunger in the 1850s, when the potatoes got a mold, they never recovered from that. There's still 4.5 million inhabitants, and the distilleries all vanished, and there were 2 distilleries left over, one in the very south, Middleton, where they collected all the famous brands like Jameson, Paddy's, Powers, and so on, and they were all produced then in that new Middleton distillery. And all the distilleries in Dublin, they closed down. Today there are 1 or 2 new distilleries in Dublin. And there was the one in Northern Ireland, and this is Bushmills. We'll come to that bottle later. And they still had their market because Northern Ireland still belonged to the UK, and they were still in the Commonwealth, so they did not suffer that much. And then there had been a vodka plant from potatoes in the very northeast of the Republic of Ireland, and then they converted that into a pharmaceutical plant, alcohol plant, and then a family called Teeling bought that pharmaceutical plant, and in the late 80s, last century, they converted that pharmaceutical alcohol plant into a whiskey distillery called the Cooley Distillery, and then they started to produce a peated single malt whiskey. This was completely new for Ireland. You hadn't seen a peated malt whiskey for many decades, for a century probably. And this was called Connemara. The name was chosen from the tourist region in the west of the Republic. This distillery is located in the east, but Connemara is in the west. But that name was famous in the world, Connemara. And, people looked after that whiskey, and then they decided, well, let's have a longer maturation, have a 12-year-old of that. And so this Connemara 12 years of age is one of my very, very favorite from Ireland, because it's a single malt, because it's mature. Most of the Irish whiskies do not have an age statement on it, and most of them are coming from column stills and not from pot stills. And this one is a single malt whiskey as it's produced in the style in Scotland, and it's smoky, peaty as it's on the Isle of Islay, very famous today, and it's well-rounded because it's matured, it's aged 12 years. But prices are quite high for every whiskey which carries an age statement in Ireland. That's history, that's normal for them. But prices did not rise that much as they did in Scotland with the shortages of matured whiskey. So today the 12-year-old is, well, not that badly priced in comparison to the Scottish ones. It's nearly reasonably priced. 40s, upper 40s, 50s, you pay for that, I think. Sometimes it's more expensive when the amount is, or the stocks are low. Yeah. The next one is Bushmills, 21 years of age, and I remember that bottle when it was a Madeira finish. This is a single malt whiskey from from Northern Ireland, and it's located in the county of Antrim, I think it's the name. And there, in the year 1608, a distillery got their license to produce Ushkabaha whiskey. And that was not the Bushmills distillery. This is from, I think, the mid-18th century, the buildings you see today. But this is the reason why they write the 1608 on their label, on their bottle, and telling the world this is the oldest licensed distillery in the world. And then in Scotland they say, no, we produced whiskey even before. We have a written statement in the Chequers Roll where Friar John was granted several bushels to produce Ushkabaha, water of life. So 1494, Scotland had its 500th anniversary in 1994. That's a figure, yes, but historians say distillation came with the Celtic people, which came from the region of Bavaria, where I live today, and they were hunted chastened by the Romans, and they had to emigrate to Ireland, and from there they emigrated further on to Scotland, where the Hadrian's Wall separated Scotland as not a Roman Empire belonging to England, which belonged to the Roman Empire. So with this, the whiskey should have reached first Ireland and second Scotland, but written proof says first Scotland, later on Ireland. Yeah, and the Bushmills, they have a blended whiskey with a white label, very million-selling bottle. Then there is a reasonable 10 years of age, but it lacks a little bit the intensity of multiple cask maturation. But it's a very good single malt whiskey, which separates that whiskey from the big number of blends from Ireland. Nearly every whiskey in Ireland is blended whiskey. There are only very few single malt whiskies. And now a lot of smaller distilleries had opened. I think a dozen or so are running already. Not all have whiskies with 3 years of age already, and they produce single malt as well. And this one is matured in normal ex-bourbon casks, as well refill, and then matured in Oloroso sherry casks and Madeira casks, which bring some spiciness to this whiskey. It's quite high priced, but 21 years of age is today as well expensive in Scotland. So this one was expensive today. It's reasonable priced, and it's really one of my famous Irish whiskies. And the last one is the Suntory Yamasaki, 12 years of age, and this is not my favorite Japanese whiskey. My favorite is the 18 years Yamasaki, which has a decent amount of sherry cask whiskey in it, but that one isn't available or only very rare, and the price went up through the roof. It's sold for 80, 90, 10 to 15 years ago, and today they sell it for 400, 500. Incredible what people are able to pay for that whiskey. And so the 12 years of age, it went up to 80 as well from 50. But it's available in quantities, so I put it here on the table as a placeholder for the 18 years of age. It's an excellent whiskey. I like it very, very much, but it lacks a little bit the sherry cask influence from the 18 years of age, but it's not available, so I show this one as second in row, and I like it very much. The Japanese whiskey makers, the start was a man traveling to Scotland in the 1920s, learning how to make whiskey, and he married in Scotland and brought his wife over to Japan. And there they founded Suntory whiskey making. And his companion, he separated 10 years later, I think, or 8 years later, if I remember right. And he founded Nikka, the second big whiskey distilling company in Japan. And the Japanese are very exact people. They produce to the point from bottle to bottle. And so it's no surprise that these Japanese whiskey taste as Scottish whiskies do. So they are exact replicas, and from time to time I think they're better than the original. So these are my favorite international whiskies. There are some from India, Switzerland, Germany, of course, Canada and other countries as well. But the bottles change from year to year or from a few years to a few years. So I can't say this one is the best Indian bottle since 1993 because it's no longer available. There are different casks, different maturations coming out. So it's quite difficult to figure out other countries which have a steady amount of constantly produced whiskies which belong to the best over the last 25 years. And because not every bottle of this one would have been viable, I left some out and concentrated on these 5 whiskies because they are available. Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned. There's more to come.